Bro, you're not even trying to last hit. You don't understand how this game works.
Gotta think more Team Fortress, less League.
No, more League. You need to last hit. You need to not chase kills. You need to play safe behind your objective.
Also that, very objective based.
This guy compared Deadlock to Team Fortress 2, which I strongly disagree with, but I can see what he was saying. Team Fortress 2 is much closer to Overwatch in that there's an objective on a rail, sometimes, that you are trying to advance against the enemy team, which is defending and trying to stop you from moving that thing forward. Deadlock is much closer to League of Legends, Dota 2, and Smite. Those games have stationary objectives, usually 3 tiers of them, and a final boss kind of objective, which itself has 2 or 3 last bastion types of buildings, whatever they're called, which need to be knocked down. This is the main objective of Deadlock: knock down the buildings. They even call it the objective in the post-game summary, but there are people who still chase kills anyway and lose the game because of it. Those people get stuck in low rankings because they're not actually playing the game. They're playing their own version of whatever it is inside of Deadlock. Technically, Deadlock is a third-person shooter MOBA. MOBA is a bad acronym. All that you really need to know is that there's an objective, which isn't killing people. Yes, it is something you can do in the game, but it's not how you win. So focusing on the objectives and not dying is really the best way to try and win. In Team Fortress 2 and Overwatch, your characters don't really scale in power. In League, Smite, Dota, and Deadlock, your characters grow in power as the game progresses, as you beat enemies, as you take down objectives and troopers. So people I've seen don't understand that a person who is 10,000 points ahead of them on the top numbers is significantly stronger than them. But somebody who's that far ahead of you will beat you in a 1v1, almost guaranteed. And people who start off Deadlock games thinking that they can go hard charging full tilt usually end up dying a bunch and cost their team a lot, because not only are they giving the enemy team a lot of experience, they themselves are missing out on experience not being in the lane. And this has come up a lot in these lower ranks. People will just throw themselves into it right off the bat. Contrast this with a high level game. They're focused on last hitting and denying, which is something that people who don't understand these types of games don't do. The little orbs, green and orange orbs, need to be shot regardless. If you see an orb, shoot at it. After 10 minutes or whatever, they might have changed the time. After a certain period of time, you absolutely need to shoot the orbs, because players don't get experience unless they get the orbs. They pop automatically, but you can shoot them before they pop, meaning you can steal the other team's experience and money. They're the same thing in this game. So hitting those is very important, and that's another thing that I see new players absolutely not doing. They're just focused on shooting the enemy and letting their troopers fight and last hit each other, which is something you want to avoid. When they kill each other, nobody gets experience. You have to get the very last hit on one of these things in order to get experience, and then the orb is a secondary part of the experience. Late game, that last hit doesn't give experience, and it's only the orb that does. You still need to last hit it to make it generate an orb. Getting a melee hit will count as a last hit and orb confirmation simultaneously. So in the first few minutes of the game, at least solidly the first 5 minutes of the game, the vast majority of characters need to be focused on last hitting and denying. As your character progresses on these initial levels, gets skills, and buys some basic items, then you can more seriously focus on trying to avoid calling them kills, because if you say kills a million times in a YouTube video, that might not be great. I don't know. We're rolling with it. So getting picks on enemy team members is another great way to get the thing that you need to continue to advance both your player and buy items. After the first few minutes of the game, definitely around minute 10, because there are free power-ups that you can get, and this makes it very easy to roam into a different lane and try and get a pick. After this initial laning phase, that's when things begin to break down. And after the lanes have fully broken down, that's when you're kind of in the mid game. And once more and more objectives get destroyed, you transition into the late game. Shifting from the laning stage, which is the beginning or early part of the game, into the mid game is a very difficult thing to figure out when you first begin. Because yes, the game tells you stay in your lane, knock down the thing, keep doing that. It doesn't say, after a while, it's a good idea to help your friends. In the post-game summary, the lane stats graphs end at 9 minutes. So we at the very least have a hard, fast set for, quote, laning stage stats. At 10 minutes, there should be a definite push because of those power-ups which appear on the sides of the map. So between 9 and 10 minutes, we'll say, is guaranteed to have some disruption. And that is a difficult thing to deal with sometimes because your lane might not be as far ahead as another. Most people want to try and fight back and defend their lane, which is good, and you should do most of the time, but it is also a good idea to play safe, because again, dying gives the enemy team experience and prevents you from getting experience. So playing safe is always a good idea. With that being said, you do also have to get into fights occasionally. Now, depending on who you're playing, where you are in the fight may change. You may be near the front where all the action is. You may be much further back because your character will get squished very quickly. And then there are mid-range characters, of course, which can move in between these two spaces and do all kinds of different things. Either way, it's a great time to put it all together and get to the final point, which is, if you know the basics of the game, the basics of how the characters work, i.e. advancement and some very simple items, and then the role of the character itself, you know, front, back, support, damage, tank. Characters can be built many different ways in this game. But if you understand what you're trying to accomplish, then you should be able to get to the final point, which is fighting as a team. Once you begin fighting as a team, the real fun of the game begins to unlock, because abilities synergize or counter enemies, and unexpected results happen. That miracle shot gets landed, or so-and-so gets a stun off at the perfect time. Another person saves the teammate because this happened in the split second right before an enemy threw their, all of these things happen naturally when the game starts rolling the way that it should. You can try and force it, and maybe 1 out of 100 times be successful. But really, if you play the game correctly, everyone will begin to scale up in power and begin to challenge objectives, defend them, go back and forth. All of these things develop naturally as long as you just, play the way it was meant to be played. Finally, once you're feeling confident, the lanes have broken down a little bit, you maybe have taken all the tier 2s, all the walkers are down, and you're starting to push for the final base stuff. This is when the big team fights start happening. Groups of 4, 5, and 6, a lot of the time, rolling as fast as they can down a lane, trying to push and either completely destroy an objective or heavily damage it. Who is in the ball right now? Who do we need to defend against it? Can we spare someone to split push a lane, or, go to a separate lane that is not the focus of this team fight right now? And those are late game dynamics, which we can talk about later on. Ultimately, you need to understand the basics of what type of game this is, the very introductory beginnings of the game and how to begin your character journey, what you're trying to do with your character and the function that they can fill, and then finally how you fit into a team or team fight scenario. And once you get a general understanding of all of these things, the details work themselves out, your play style preferences develop, and you start to say, I like playing this character more, I don't like this one so much, I like playing this character in this style, and I don't necessarily want to play style B so much. And so you begin to come up with your own builds, your own skill progressions and things like that. All of that, of course, which will be touched on later. But hopefully this has given some kind of a good foundation to begin to think about things in a bigger picture and to try and win the game in a way that other high level people are trying to win so that you can get to those high levels as well. Or at least not get completely rolled over and wonder why that's happening. If this video was informative, entertaining, or infuriating, please let me know. Consider it LCS, and I appreciate you watching. Thank you. Have a good one.